Last night I was at an event in Hollywood and they said Mexican Americans don't go see movies. But that wasn't the case for our film. You know, we sold out every theater that we did. I think we sold out 27 of the 35.
Brandon, which movie theater did you contact first?
I believe it was AMC in downtown LA. That was our first film screening. And our initial plan was just to do one screening. That was the plan. We were just going to do one screening, get word of mouth out online, but that quickly turned into dozens of screenings after that. But yeah, we just only had plans for one screening.
And you called up the theater or you emailed them?
Yeah, so I contacted the theater. I asked them, how much would it cost to rent out the theater for a couple hours and to have a private event so we can put up some posters and invite media along and things like that. They gave me a price. We worked it out, and then that's what we did. Yeah.
And would you mind sharing what the price was for, 3 hours?
Sure, yeah, I think, I don't remember what it was for that exact theater, but we went on and did a lot of theaters after that. And so if you want me to discuss that a little bit, I can.
Yeah, I was curious, what does that cost?
So we rented out that theater, if I had to guess, we probably paid maybe $3,000 or something like that for 3 hours or something like that. Once the film played, a lot of people were excited about the film. A lot of people were tweeting about it and mentioning it on social media. And so we quickly decided to rent another theater. And so we put up the money again. Every theater is a little bit different, but it tends to range between $2,000 and $3,500 for anywhere between 200 to 400 seats. We sold out the next screening that we did. And so we did it again, and then we sold out again. And then from that point was when we started to realize that maybe we had a film on our hands that was going to be popular. And so we kept getting calls from different cities. And so we started renting out theaters and playing them in different cities. What happened was, because we had sold all of them out, we actually reached a point where the theaters would no longer rent to us. Theaters started approaching us. They wanted to play the film, but they would only do ticket splits. And so we couldn't rent anymore. We had a number of theaters that wouldn't let us rent, but they would do ticket splits. And that was because we were bringing out 400, 500 people every show. Like when we did Sacramento, they brought out 100 extra chairs, and we did 400 seats there. We did 400 in Portland. We did 400 in Tucson. And so they were big crowd sizes. And that was a learning experience in and of itself, navigating, dealing with movie theaters, because I had not prepared for that. I just learned all of that as I went.
May I ask, what was the turnaround time to pay you back for the ticket sales?
Every theater's different. There's times when I had to really bug the theater to get my money back, where it took maybe a month or two before I finally got them to mail a check. And that's one thing that I've learned in this process too, is that everybody's going to fight on giving you your money. But generally speaking, if you set the parameters ahead of time and you're very clear, you can mitigate some of those problems. So what I started doing after I learned that it was going to be hard to get your money is we started having the theaters sign a contract ahead of time. And the contract said you have to be paid by this date, or even ahead of time. If they're going to do a ticket split sometimes, and if it's sold out, you can get your money ahead of time even, depending on, if you can get them to sign the contract. So that's what we did, and that fixed a lot of the problems, and it weeded out the ones who you might have had problems with. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So in some ways, it was sort of problem of prosperity in that they wouldn't rent to you. You had to do the ticket split, but then you said, okay, well, if you want to do that, here's what I have, and you need to agree to my terms, and that was, right, you need to pay me the ticket sales by this date. So it was a win-win, I guess?
Yeah, it was a win-win. And at this point, the crowds were so big in every city, it was good for the theaters because they were selling a lot in concessions. So selling a lot in popcorn and things like that. And so because of that, we were able to dictate a lot of terms, with a lot of these theaters, and with very little pushback for most of them. And it surprised me because I thought that this was how it's always done. I didn't realize that this was not how it's always done. In talking with some of the theater owners, like when I was in Tucson and Portland, they were like, hey, we really think this is cool what you're doing because you're going around the country and you're getting your film in all these theaters. And I'm like, well, isn't that what you're supposed to do? And they're like, well, no, normally you work with the distributor and they put it into the theaters. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. It's like, I didn't know that. And so I had been cutting out all these middle people and just going directly to the theaters. And I learned that there's a lot of independent theaters in this country still, not as many as there used to be, but there's still a lot of them, and they'll work with you directly. And if you can show that you have an audience for what you're doing, then they're more than happy to work with you.
Well, so let me see if I understand this. You did not have a distributor at this point.
No, we got our 3 distribution offers later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So basically, because it was such a hard project to pitch to distributors, I wanted to show them that there was an audience. And so I basically went out and took a gamble, and we rented the theaters. We worked with all these theaters. We played in 35 cities. And then by the time AFM came around, word had gotten out. We had been covered by PBS and NPR and all these places. And we got 3 distribution offers at AFM because they had seen, I guess, word of mouth, I mean, when we played at AFM, the theater was filled with people who didn't even work at it. They were like the janitors at AFM and the cooks at AFM. They weren't even the producers. And they were having people go because they wanted to see the movie because there was such word of mouth about it. And that alone got the attention of distributors because they were like, wow, you booked the film to play at AFM, no distributors went, but all the cooks went who were working at AFM and all the janitors went. And so I got follow-up emails because we only had one meeting that would initially at AFM. But after that, we got contacted and they're like, we want to learn more about the film and stuff like that. So.
And did you make a lot of these screenings events?
A lot of these screenings became events by virtue of the audience. And this was something that, again, we had to work out with the theaters because we didn't, it wasn't just playing the movie. Everywhere that we played, you would have 10, 20 lowriders come out, which means you're gonna have a lot of people taking photos, which means crowd control. We reached a point where we had theaters start to ask us to bring in somebody to deal with traffic and crowd control. Like in Gardena, we did really big audiences 2 or 3 times at Gardena, and that's a 600-person theater. And we had to have people separately doing traffic because we had so many lowriders out, huge lines, and that brought out taco vendors and things like that, which opened up a whole nother thing because then we started having vendors selling things. We had food, which means people wanted permits. And eventually, we had some theaters say, hey, we want to do the movie theater, but we don't want to make it a big thing. And I basically had to tell them, that's not an option. That's what you get with this audience. If you're going to play films for this audience and they're jazzed about this movie, you're going to get the lowriders out, you're going to get the taco vendors out, you're going to get the music, you're going to get a bunch of people. And, you can't pick and choose. It's all in one. And that's what we did. And it really became sort of a phenomenon in a lot of ways because, again, you're talking about a documentary film. This is a documentary film playing in the theaters. Last night I was at an event in Hollywood and they said, Mexican Americans don't go see movies. But that wasn't the case for our film. We sold out every theater that we did. I think we sold out 27 of the 35 cities. So not bad. They will go see it if they're really interested in it.
Who said that? I mean, in terms of what movie was this?
It was at an event that was in Hollywood, and I was talking with a producer, and he was talking about how one of the challenges they've had is getting Mexican-American-centric movies or Latino-centric movies made because their belief among distributors is that they don't go to the movie theater. And so they'll do streaming sometimes, but mostly AVOD. And so that was not my experience. Yeah.
How were you getting the word out about these cross-country screenings? Was there any organization or a team helping you?
Sure. Well, I knew going in because it was an indie film. I knew that we needed to be very deliberate in our marketing and do what we could with the tools that we had. And so I went in with a plan that I was going to put out the first trailer 6 months before the film first played. And I stuck to that. And when I picked that date, I made sure to pick a date where there were no sporting events. I made sure to pick a date where there were nothing going on with politics or anything like that. And I picked a date that was earlier in the week, not a Monday, because everybody's just checking their emails on Monday and catching up. You wanted it to be on a Tuesday or Wednesday, so it can flow through the rest of the week and into the weekend. That was the goal. Because for us to make this film work, we needed it to do well on social media. And so we made the trailer, and of course the whole time I was in the back of my mind a little bit nervous that something was going to happen, because we had just been through COVID. We had just been through all these riots. We had just had all this political division, and everything, every day something's happening, it feels like. So of course in the back of my mind I was worried, and I felt like dropping the trailer was the most important part of this whole process. That first introduction to the rest of the world, of giving them a glimpse of what the film was going to be about, we needed that to go well. And we dropped it. Nothing else happened that day. It took off. It went viral. And from that point, we were, I think, kind of on the road to having a pretty good opening, because that had generated so much buzz. And
I know this is sort of sensitive, but did you pay for any views? Sometimes people use Facebook marketing and it does help them.
Yeah, no, we didn't pay for any marketing. Mm-hmm. Now that we have our app, we've paid for marketing to tell people to go watch the film on the app. But during the process of making the film, yeah, we never did any paid ads. We were fortunate in that our trailer got picked up by numerous people with big accounts. We had numerous accounts that have 400, 500,000 followers that retweeted the movie or shared the movie on Instagram, things like that. And everybody in the film has a pretty big following as well. Most of the guys in the film have 100,000 plus following. And so that helped as well with getting the movie out. And from there we would release just little snippets and clips leading up to our premiere.
And so are you capturing emails and what towns seem to be really zeroed in on the film?
Yeah, I actually didn't do that early on. Two regrets that I have was, one, not getting emails of everybody who came out to the shows initially. Although for the shows that we ran, we were able to get emails through Eventbrite, but we didn't run every show. And the other thing was that we didn't sell any merchandise at those shows, because those shows were really big. And even the smaller shows that we've done since then, we sell a lot of t-shirts, a lot of posters at. And so I wish I had thought about that earlier, but I didn't. You kind of live and you learn, but yeah.
But sometimes merch can go different ways. Like, people always assume that it's going to do well, and it doesn't always do well. But
yeah, no, I don't think, again, I think like this film, everything that happened with this film would not work on our next film. This film just happened to hit at the right time, where it hit a market that needed this type of film, and the merchandise worked because it matched the aesthetic of the culture we were talking about in the film, so people were really interested in the artwork. We had some really distinct artwork done that featured some tattoo artists that was in the film, and we worked with a guy who does punk rock show posters in San Francisco. That was another thing I did. When we made the artwork for the film, I wanted to find somebody who doesn't make artwork for films. So I went out of my way to find somebody who has never made a film poster. And I found a guy who makes punk rock show posters. And I said, hey, we want to make this movie poster. And he was kind of like, that's not what I do. And I'm like, that's exactly why I want you. It's because you're going to think different. And I had an idea of what I wanted to do as far as the collage went, but I wanted to have sort of this street punk rock aesthetic to it in the way it was put together. And so it worked really well. And that the imagery of the film, along with the name, I think went a long ways on social media, because people really liked the imagery, and we saw a lot of posters still, and we saw a lot of t-shirts with that on it. So
So you wanted to have kind of the fanzine or street aesthetic and not feel too like, oh, somebody did this in, whichever program.
Yeah, well, you'll see. So our movie, when it comes out in October 15th, they're using a different poster.
Oh, the distributor
Yeah,
is?
the distributor's using a different poster.
Interesting.
So even though we have a poster, that they're using a different trailer too. So funny thing, we already have a poster that's tested, and we have a trailer that's done 100 million views on TikTok, but they still wanted to go with a different trailer and a different poster. And so it just shows you that as nice as they are for distributing the film, doesn't mean they really know what they're talking about. They're gonna go with what makes them feel comfortable, and that's usually gonna be a more stereotypical type of look. And they have a look that they like for posters and a look that they like for trailers. And so for us, that was why we kept all the rights that we did when we did this film, because I know our audience, and that's why the film worked. The film worked because I know our audience. If I'm being honest, the distributors don't know our audience. And so that was why I was reluctant to give up all of the rights that they wanted, was for that reason. Had I given up all those rights, I don't think the film would have been profitable. I don't think we would have made our money back. I don't think it would have been as popular as it was. So I think it was important for us to control all the things that we did to this point. And now that we reached this point and did a year, now I'm comfortable with saying, all right, now we can move it to streaming, and they can use a different artwork if they want and a different trailer.